G'day guys, it's Calvin from the Cartoon Company in New Zealand. Today we're going to run up a 1UZ using a Megasquirt. And I'm not a great fan of these computers. I've done a bit more video of the prep job I've done on this particular ECU and the setup. And I'm not sure whether I'm going to include this at this point in time. So we can buy quite a cheap unit over here, and it comes wired up as a plug and play unit, and you pop it on. Not all of them have fuel pump outputs, they don't have a fan output, and a few other bits and pieces that they just don't have. And Mike's about to make noise. He's got that look on his face. Can you hurry up? Chop, 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 chop. Are you done now? Yeah. Anyway, this one didn't have any idle control, so it wouldn't idle properly when it was cold. So I've gone through and I've wired up, I've added to the loom and put wiring in for this 2-wire idle speed control unit, which is just a plug-in setup that I can supply. Looking at the plugs on this loom, one of the reasons they're cheap, this is the plug. And if I get a proper one, I'll grab a genuine unit. So this is the genuine plug. You can see there's a rubber seal in there. This is a aftermarket copy. You'll see there's no seal. This is the relay setup I took out of this loom. That was spliced off for the fuel pump, but it would run all the time. And as I said, no fan output. So I've removed that. And this is what I've built to replace it with. I've used an EFI relay, an ignition relay, fuel pump relay, and a fan relay. I should actually mention that this video is also going to function as the instructions for the customer. So he's going to be able to watch it and see what I've done and know how to fit it back into his car. Over here we've got the fuses. This is the main ignition input. You can see it's running over here to my stud. We've got battery power going in, and probably we're not going to zip tie it to the power supply. I'll supply a plastic bag and you can slip it into the Anderson plug there. So this whole setup can plug into the car so it can be removed easily. And there's the other side, there's for the vehicle. This is our fuel pump output, and this is our fan output. So that's all sorted there. When this setup is fitted to the vehicle, you need to trim the crank trigger. So it's this one here. That one gets cut off, and I'll show the crank trigger when I swap it back, because this motor needs to run like a standard motor later on. And just as a note, that is a VVTi crank trigger wheel compared to the non-VVTi. Here's our ECU. Crank loom has been run separate because they're quite prone to interference, and it's got a built-in map sensor. With the power connected, ignition is on the ignition in, which is the 3rd wire in, so it's nice and simple, goes through a fuse, and we're going to power the system up. And I've already got the controller all loaded up. So we've got some temperatures in here.
Yeah, probably 14 or 15.
It's not 14 or 15, Mike. Today it's saying that the engine's at 62, the manifold temp is at 28 going on this motor.
I don't think it's 28 here, my friend.
It's probably because it's got an intake manifold and the sensors in the intake manifold, and it's still quite warm in there. But the motor's not actually at 62. I'm going to show the fan operation. So the fan's the end wiring here. So we're just going to pop in here, and we're probably actually going to set this up. I've connected my test light into the end wire where the fan is. We're looking at the temperature. I've set the fan to come on down in here. I've set the fan to come on here at 69, which is possibly a little bit cool, but it's going to work for this test. And I've got a little resistor wheel here tapped into the temp sensor wiring, and that does allow me to change the temperature. And you can see my fan when I go up to there, so that's showing 76 degrees, that the fan clicks on. The hypothetical fan, which is my test light. There we go, on and off. So we'll set those a little bit higher. We'll set that at 92. And we'll set 2 degrees difference. 89.9, that's going to be close enough. We're going to burn that. We'll just check here with the fan output. Can we get it hot enough? Oh, I can't quite get it over enough. Bugger. Plan B. Temp sensor. Plan B, we're going to use the heat gun and we'll heat the sensor up. So at the moment, the coolant temp it's saying is at 20. It's probably a little bit warmer than it is today, but not far off. We'll give it a bit of a heat. It's climbing quite rapidly. We're nearly at 90. We should click on. Oh, there we go. We go well up to 100. Our engine's overheating. It's at 100. We'll let it cool down. We should see that fan flick back off. There we have it. So that fan circuit is working. I've added an oxygen sensor wire. Using the factory Toyota plug, it will plug into any Toyota sensor. I've moved the earth. We require the throttle position sensor for idle control, and air temp will help with some of the tuning. And this is the customer's throttle body. We can see intake temp, presently at 27 degrees. If I shove my heat gun up here. Wow, look how fast that reacted. That went to like 90 degrees instantly. Faster than a water temp sensor.
350 degrees.
I had it set at 300, my heat gun. Yeah. Next, we're going to look at the, for the oxygen sensor wiring, the power supply is on the fuel pump relay. So it only gets power while the engine actually running. If it's sitting, it does prime like a fuel pump does prime. So it has a little bit of a warm up, and then it will not run until the engine is running. And that saves burning out that the heater element of the oxygen sensor. Right, next looking at the fuel pump. That is of course on prime now, so that's on the third relay. We'll just pop that in there. If we touch this, I really need some ear muffs. Got some ear muffs? Got some muffs? Muffs and muffs?
Yeah.
I'll show you these ones, just while I'm waiting. Thanks. Oh. I've calibrated up the throttle position sensor. So we can see that moves quite nicely and comes all the way back to 0. With the throttle position sensor, I've found in the past that the Megasquirts are quite prone to interference on that wire. So one way, of course, to solve it is not run one, but I prefer to run it and run a shielded cable. So fuel pump, When we turn the key on, it now primes. Starts pretty good, eh? And it runs. Rub, rub. So a little bit of tuning required for the throttle positions, for the accelerator enrichment. Whoop. The installation into the vehicle is going to be really simple on this vehicle, on this setup. It's got a main plug here, which is quite firm.
Really firm.
So the ECU is its own loom now. The relays and fuses are on its own setup.
Amazing.
Amazing. On the relays and fuses, just 3 connections needed. Ignition switch to this one, fuel pump to the fuel pump, and fan to the fan. And that all works. Start is not included in this loom, it's elsewhere in the wiring. Oxygen sensor, plug it on the engine, vroom vroom, make it go. So really simple. So I actually had someone ask the other day, I had the set of these headers on a 3UZ. These are not a standard set of exhaust manifolds at all. These have ended up on all my test engines. That's a set of headers that I make, and I will actually be looking at putting a factory flange on the back of them to make it a bolt-in to the likes of a Sora or an LS400. So it's time for me to pack this one up and pop it into a box. So all ready to go into a box, throttle body, idle speed control unit, relays and fuses, wiring loom with the correct wiring and the throttle position sensor in it as well. All good to go. So one of my thoughts on the Megasquirt is, and I'm not really a fan, they're very similar in the fuel control to a lot of the older computers we used to use 10, 15 years ago. So their fuel metering isn't as accurate as I would hope for. This particular one has only got 2 injector outputs. So factory, they either had a 4 outputs or 8 outputs. So you get quite noisy injectors. But at the end of the day, you can make them work. They will run the engine. Tom's Ute, which is a video that will be out very soon, that runs a Megasquirt. But for the amount of time we spent getting it how we liked it, we probably could have put in a better computer and got better results faster. Probably the biggest thing you can look at when you're choosing an aftermarket computer is, one, will it do the job that you want it to do? What are your expectations? And does the tuner who you have chosen to work on the vehicle, are they familiar with that ECU and proficient with it? That's probably one of the biggest recommendations I can make, is talk to your tuner. Don't ask what the best ECU is. Go talk to your tuner and say, what are we going to need? What'll do the job? These are what I'm wanting to do. And build that relationship with your tuner. But right now, I'm putting this one in a box, sending it off to its customer. So there's the wheel for the Megasquirt. Missing this tooth at the bottom here. Megasquirt wheel. This one goes back in.
So why do they take a tooth?
Okay, so they take a tooth off so it knows where TDC is. Okay, because you're running 2 coils, and a distributor as such, it doesn't need to know exactly where number 1 is. So it can find number 1, 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 6, 1 and 6 won't matter. As long as it fires a spark when either number 1 is at TDC firing or exhaust and number 6 is at the opposite, the engine will run. So the ECU needs to know that. So because it's not going for sequential injection, it's grouped injection. It's putting the fuel in whenever. So as long as it knows where TDC is, it will fire a spark and it will get the timing right on those cylinders, and it doesn't care about fuel timing as such. It'll go, there's 11 teeth and there's a gap. So where there's that gap, okay, I'm expecting there to be a tooth. There's a theoretical tooth there. It doesn't exist. And then so many after a certain point, because it then knows in the revolutions when to fire. So it might say, you know, it might be after the next tooth after the gap, 5 degrees after that I fire a spark or whatever. And that's the way they do it. So pretty simple. And that's where you can get away with, because you've got the distributor set up. If you go to individual coils, you really do need a proper sync if it's wired as full sequential. So you use, they'll call this one they'll call this, generally is known, well, you call it your crank sensor of course, but they'll also call it a speed sensor. And the other one I prefer to use as a sync or a position sensor. Sync is my preferred word, the sync. Cam sensor, sync sensor, position sensor. So look at this. So we've got these big ugly wires. Look at that join.
Oh, it's joined, isn't it?
It's joined. It looks like you did it on a bad day.
Even
I think your solder joints would be better than that.
Soldering so last week.
And then we come up here. So we've got all these wires running up, okay, through the braid, which is quite neat, tidy. And then we come up here and every single one of those has got a join in it. So we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wires there. And then of course the injector wires are grouped, so there must be another join for the injector wires coming up through here.
They all flick off.
Yeah, so it's 2 injector drives. And that's why the injectors are quite noisy with the Megasquirt. The tuners, they're only average with the tune, like compared to the late model, the proper computers. Like the fuel atomization, the fuel delivery, the fuel control is so much nicer on the better ones. But how do you expect a job to work when it's got, and now look at these, they're massively long joins. Hence, plugs. Here's Chinese plugs. There's not even a seal on the bottom of them. So they're not waterproof.
So, bin it?
No, I'm fixing it. I'll sort it. I'll fix it nice. Now I'm going to put it, so I'm going to put the idle speed control unit in. Where is it? Here it is. So I got the 2-wire idle speed unit, fit on the plenum. And to have idle speed control, proper idle speed control, you have to have a TPS. And I'm going to put that air temp off that, because I did that. That's what I did the second throttle body for. That's what that throttle body's for. So I'll add the TPS, add the air temp, add the idle speed control. And I can't see a fan output. So I've got this wire. I've got to double check whether it actually has a fan. No EFI relay. That looks to be the power supply for coils and fuel pump. Oh, old Yellow got individual coils last night. I was into it. Yeah, I took them out. I put them back to leads. So old Yellow's going to get some individual coils.
Does this mean to have individual coils?
No. That's only, it's got built-in igniters in there, that's one good thing.
What's the vacuum hose?
So that's for your map sensor, the vacuum hose. So I got to fix, get down this. Get down. What are you doing? You want to do some wiring too? Come on then. Are you going to do some wiring? Oh, yes. Oh, keep it away from the razor blade. Good girl. Oh, yeah. Right, let's do some work. You're fixing a Hilux. I'm fixing a Megasquirt. I have these blue wires as an earth, right? And over here it's a different blue wire. That's okay, because, you know, it might need a join going into there. And you've got earths over here, which are blue wires. Oh, there's the earths. So there's the earths, right? So this is an earth. And then we come over here. So one of these blue wires is an earth, and the other one is for the temp sensor for the ECU. So temp sensor for the ECU's that wire there. So we can see it's blue there, and it's blue there. And they change to these blue wires. Here's the temp sensor, and it's a yellow wire and a brown wire. So there's another join somewhere in there.
As long as it's connected though, eh?
Yeah, as long as it's connected. Don't worry about if there's a million joins. I managed to get an ECU, a wire from here to that sensor, and I put a join in the earths just off the ECU to connect all my earths. Are you trying to find it? Yeah, there's a big, this was all taped, big blobby.
Yeah, so it feels like some more.
There should be another join for like the injectors. It'll be, one's there.
Felt like one quite a bit there somewhere.
Here, big join there, big solder join. Oh no, I'll continue. And this is the fuel pump output, so it leaves. So that isn't actually fuel pump. That's your coil relay. No fan output. I don't even know it's got the transistor in the ECU. Hence, it's cheap. Hence, this whole setup costs less than I buy the parts for. So you certainly get what you pay for, and not simplifying it for the customer. This one actually has a shielded wire for the crank sensor, but the shielding isn't connected, so that's kind of pointless. I wonder if I should put that earth to the block.
Yeah,
I think so, eh? I think I should put it to the block. And coming up with a plan, relay block, relays with fuses, should solve the problem. 2-wire idle speed control has been fitted, and I've put the proper throttle body on. Throttle position wiring here, air temp sensor wiring here, idle speed control wiring there. Just deciphering this now, joining some earths. It's not a problem. We're not having any problems. How to get rid of this problem here? Problem solved. We'll put a plug on, then we can make a fuse box. It'll just all plug together, much neater and tidier. So we have a loom kind of going together now. I'm going to clip that on the engine. I've got to do the air temp and the throttle position sensor wiring, and then we're going to actually have a wiring loom that's finished, and we'll build some relays and fuses. I've gone away from this idea, going to go to a proper fuse box. So I'll talk to you once it's up and running. Or well, once we've connected in and powered it up and see how we get on. If we're going to make this run, I probably should take out my blanking gaskets. Other things that this loom doesn't have would be the temp gauge for the dash. So the customer has to add that, and the starter trigger. There's no start trigger in this loom. Righto guys, I'm back into this Megasquirt job. I've belted out a set of relays and fuses. So we went from this, that was the relay for the coils, that was the fuse for the ECU, and it had a 15 ampere in it. Going by the Megasquirt diagram that's easily available online, the ECU is recommended to have a 3 amp. I have put I was putting a 5 amp in it. I was putting a 5 amp in it. It was late last night. We'll change to a 5. And the ECU is this one. I don't have a 3 amp fuse, but 5 is much more appropriate. Then I've got an individual circuit, just like the diagram, and it's not like me to use the diagrams actually. Ignition for the idle speed control, coils for the oxygen sensor, which I've added, the wiring I've added for the oxygen sensor, ignition in, fuel pump, and a fan. And I've added a fan that's of course not on that diagram. I've run a separate ECU relay and a separate coil relay. I just find they tend to get less interference by doing that. I am planning a series on diagnosing your 1UZ with a test light, a multimeter, and an LED test light. Maybe a logic probe, but trying to do one in the future on normal, with normal tools. So I've had power in there. I thought I had this turned on. It is turned on. That is turned on. That's working. Oh, I'm on the wrong fuse. There we go. And I think my test pack is getting low. Jump pack goes in there, and it is the power for there, 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 and there. Now I chose to use these larger relays simply because they're more available. I like, on this job I could have easily gone down to smaller ones, and I like the smaller ones. And we heard that relay clicking on, clickety click click. And we heard this relay clicking on. And that jump pack really does need to go on charge. Right, I've got permanent power, that's battery power going into there. And I've used Tefsel wire, so it's quite small and compact. This relay is turned on, and this relay here is turned on. This is the output to the coils. Coil here. The test light fell off. The one closest to the tab is the power. So there we have that there. And if I pull the fuse, so this fuse here, that goes out. So it confirms that that circuit is all correct. Now just testing this, so we know that this one is power. Now watch this. I've got power to both sides of the coil. There's a bit of traffic today. Power to both sides of the coil. And I will do a video explaining that for those of the guys that don't have that knowledge. People who know, hey, that is normal, but I'll explain it in a real simple way. I've got a video planned out on that. So all the way back into here, I'm not actually sure which ones those are. That's an injector. Coils might be over here. That one and that one, I believe. Those are our two coils. So there's the power to the ECU. So this fuse should stop that. That's good. That's doing what it should. There it is. So there's the output from the coil. So I'm going to unplug the coil, and it goes away. So that goes all the way back to the ECU. I probably should explain that this does have built-in igniters into the Megasquirt. So don't try that on a normal one, because the igniter circuit is in there. And we have injectors. Power to injectors. Here it is there. It's this one. There it goes there. That's power to injectors. And again, if I go to the other side of the injector, we have power on both sides of the injector. I will explain that another day on a diagnosis of 1UZs. So this ECU is ready to power up. Right, if I disconnect ignition and power it up, we should have power at the fuel pump. Why did that not work? $37 to my fuel pump relay is okay.
Should be okay.
Well, that's what I'd hope, eh? Earth is good. Hopefully it's just in the software or it's not turned on or something. Okay, that test light. Onto that fuse there, please. So with the software attached, right? I've got my crank angle sensor, which isn't right because the Megasquirt's got one tooth cut out, so it doesn't run a cam sensor. It's telling me the fuel pump's on, but it's not on. And it's running to the correct spot. Can you just confirm we've got voltage there? Go on to, can you go to this one? Test light working. Into there. That's working. Into this one over here. So I've got power there. And go into the middle one of there. No fan output. No fuel pump output.
Shag, mate.
It's not functioning. Okay, that's cool. That will be why it's tapped off the coil. I bet you that's fuel pump wiring. You doing a Clarkson?
Yeah.
It's a Ford. Hit it with a hammer.